Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for our capstone presentations. It is 5 o'clock or 5:01, depending on which clock I'm looking at in my office. Peter, are you expecting any more participants?
I don't think so.
All right, then you can get started when you're ready. Good luck.
Thank you. So this year, or just to start, can everyone see my screen, my presentations?
Yes.
Good, thank you. So this year, or this second semester, I did a capstone entitled Investing During the COVID-19 Era. So a little bit about why I chose this project. I plan to study finance at Miami University in their Farmer School of Business this coming fall. And investing is something that's always interested me. It's something my dad got me into. I invest some of my own money myself. I've taken an investor relating class at the high school. And so I thought this project would be a good introduction to a deeper look at financial markets. And I thought it would also be helpful for me to learn how to kind of prioritize my own time, because this project is very much so on the student themselves and not a teacher constantly checking in. And I thought it would be a good walk into what some of the classes I might be taking next year could involve. So a little bit of an introduction to my presentation. I'll start off with some key terms. Then I'll dive into different steps and ways to diversify a portfolio, which I think is especially important during the past 12 to 14 months. From there, I'll discuss the rise and fall of the stay-at-home sector, which are stocks that thrived and then were hit hard when people were forced to stay in their homes for much of last year, and have since suffered as people have been allowed to return to work, return to school, travel, and other leisure activities. From there, I'll talk a little bit more about how the past year, in terms of our presidential election and change in political power, has impacted the stock market. From there, I'll talk a little bit about investing or gambling. And what I mean by that is I'll cover some topics that have become popular over the past year, to which some may see as opportunities to invest and others might perceive as more gambling or extremely risk type moves. I'll then end by discussing a little bit of the governmental impact that I think was present over the past year. So on the screen here, I reference stocks, bonds, ETFs, and mutual funds. So stocks are essentially a singular share of a publicly owned company. Bonds can come in a few different forms, and it's essentially an instrument of indebtedness of the bond issuer to the holder. And typically bonds have a specified time and method in which they will be paid back. ETFs function like a stock in the sense that they can be bought and sold throughout the day, and their price changes consistently throughout the day like a stock. It just differs because it's a bigger basket of many stocks. ETFs can be very broad. They can cover an entire market index, or they can be very specified into a specific sector, type of market, or domestic or foreign markets. And finally, mutual funds. These are typically open-ended, professionally managed funds that pool money from the investors and buy different forms of securities. These differ slightly from ETFs in the sense that mutual funds typically have a minimum, essentially a minimum buy-in or a minimum investment required to become a part of the fund. So diversification, by definition, is the process of allocating capital in a way that reduces too much exposure to one particular sector or asset and reduces risk. There are many different ways to diversify a portfolio. These can be methods such as diversifying across different sectors, foreign versus domestic companies, as well as foreign versus domestic markets. and different asset or security types, such as what I referenced in the previous slide when it comes to stocks, bonds, ETFs, and mutual funds. So these are a couple graphics that I think are helpful in terms of understanding diversification and the impacts of diversification. So these different examples only reference stocks and bonds, which to a degree limit the effectiveness of these graphs, but I still think they do a good job. So on the left-hand side, we have different growth portfolios. So these are more targeted at short-term gains to mid-term gains. And as a result, they're heavy in stocks and much lighter in bonds. Typically, stocks are much higher risk, higher reward type of investment than bonds are. I don't know. Okay, there we go. So as you can tell, if you look at the 100% stock, that example, the highest single year return was 54%, and the worst year was a loss of 43%. So that's pretty clear that that's a very risky investment, all depending on the year and what happens in that year, as you can see by almost 100% difference in the best and worst year. In the middle is a balanced portfolio options, which are more 40-60 to 60-40 of stocks and bonds. Here we can see that the worst year of any of these three ranges between about 18 and 26%, which is much less than in the growth examples, but the returns are also limited to the greatest returns being somewhere between 35 or 36%. And on the right is an income or more of a long-term focused portfolio. These tend to be very heavy in bonds. You're looking for maybe consistent small amounts of cash flow over a longer period of time. And in these examples, it's clear that these are much less riskier portfolio setups because the worst year ranges between 8 to 14%, and the best years range between 38 and 45%, which is similar to that of the balanced portfolios. So it's clear that the type of assets that are allocated into greatly impact the success and outcome of the portfolio. One reason that portfolio diversification is especially important right now and over the past year is because we've been thrown so many curveballs day by day and week by week. Things have changed much faster than we could have thought and much faster than investors could have planned for, which is why this diversification is very, very important. A couple of the reasons: we had a presidential election and a change in power, which had significant impacts on market trends as well as the attitudes and behaviors of investors in the market. We've also seen a rise in cryptocurrency and also the effect that social media can have on cryptocurrency and the market as a whole. A specific example I'll reference later has to do with a Reddit subpage called Wall Street Bets. That's the image you can see on the right. And so another reason that diversification has been incredibly important recently is because COVID situations have differed greatly country to country over time. Certain countries have been obviously hit harder than others. They've been hit harder at different times throughout this past 14-month period. Furthermore, certain countries have remained more open or more restricted, which has influenced the activities that people can partake in and the degree to which businesses can typically function. One specific example I wanted to reference was the way that Austria and New Zealand handled this. So obviously Australia and New Zealand, those two countries are very close together, but from other parts of the world, they're relatively isolated. So what they did throughout the pandemic was kind of create a commerce and economic bubble between the two countries, which allowed them to continue high levels of trade between the countries while still staying relatively isolated from other countries. And so I found a an investment fund that invests specifically in Australian and New Zealand stocks and other assets. And so on the next slide, you'll see that the right image represents this Australia-New Zealand fund. And what we can see from it is that it has recovered greatly since March of 2020, which is when the pandemic began. And it has also exceeded the levels that the portfolio was at prior to the pandemic by about 17%. Now, the image on the right is the same management firm's Africa fund, which invests in African-based companies. And compared to Australia and New Zealand, Africa has been hit much harder by the COVID-19 outbreak because of their lack of financial resources, as well as their typical lack of healthcare and medical support systems throughout many of the nations. And as a result, this Africa fund that we can see here on the left is only just creeping above what it was prior to the pandemic. And when we compare the Africa fund to the Australia New Zealand fund on the right, we can kind of see how the wealthier nations have been able to handle COVID better because they have more resources to treatments and vaccines. And as a result, this has allowed them to function at a higher level of commerce and trade, which in turn has allowed their stock market to look slightly better. So one thing I became interested in was the stay-at-home sector. So back in March of 2020, when pretty much everything shut down, people were forced to stay in their homes. Many forms of businesses, such as airlines and cruises, were essentially doing no business, and these stocks did very poorly. That being said, there were companies that really benefited from people staying home. Some of these include Zoom, Teladoc Health, Netflix, Amazon, and Shopify. Now, obviously, Zoom, we're using it right now, allowed employees as well as schools to stay connected with one another. Teladoc Health allowed healthcare providers to stay connected with their patients. Netflix allowed people to watch movies at home instead of going to the movie theaters, which were closed. Amazon allowed people to do much more of their shopping from home, and Shopify, in a similar way, allowed people to shop in different ways and be able to stay at home at the same time. Now, all these companies allowed people to continue what we would typically refer to as normal activities to the best of their ability. And as a result, these stocks did very well in the beginning and middle stages of the pandemic. This here on the right is a graph I created of 3 stocks, that being Zoom in the blue line, Shopify in the red line, and Teladoc Health represented by the green line, as compared to the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which is the black line that we see on the bottom. Now, as we can see, even to this date, in June, these 3 companies have still performed above the market average. That being said, we can see that they seem to do particularly well until about October or November. Now, at this time, it was becoming clear that a vaccine was going to become possible and widespreadly available in the coming weeks and months. And as a result, once the vaccine was able to become accessible to people in the public and on a wide scale level, this is when these stocks began to fall because the need for these things were becoming less frequent. So on the graph on the left is a zoomed in image of the graph from the previous page, but only of the year 2021. And in the beginning of 2021, that's when the vaccines had been given emergency authorization. They were becoming available on a wide scale to people, and people were becoming more comfortable going outside the house. At the same time, with the increase in vaccination rates, we can see on the right that COVID cases began to fall, and they fell pretty rapidly from about January to the end of February. From that point on, they continued to decrease, but not quite at the rate that they had for the first 2 months of the year. Now, as these cases have continued to fall, different local and state governments have greatly reduced restrictions on businesses. and this has allowed people to return to many pre-COVID activities, such as going to school or going to work, going out to restaurants, or participating in other leisure activities, or going out to eat and see other venues. And as a result, the need for Zoom and things like Teladoc Health and Shopify have somewhat decreased, which is why over this past 6-month period, those stocks have not fared as well as they did in the first 8-ish months of the pandemic. Another thing I wanted to discuss was the faults of targeted ETFs during the pandemic. Now, this goes back to the diversification aspect of my presentation, in which ETFs are essentially a basket of different stock holdings. As we can see on the left is the ARK Innovation Fund. ARK is an investment firm headed by Cathie Wood. And these are very targeted funds. They're specialized in what they call disruptive innovation. These are companies that think outside the box and really try to change the way we do daily activities. They're very typically they're very tech heavy, and that's why, as we can see from the beginning of the graph on the left to about February, these portfolio had done very, very well. But since then, as people have began to invest outside of the tech sector and back into travel or other leisure type companies, this innovation ETF has not fared so well. Now we can compare this to the Vanguard 500 Index Fund ETF on the right, known as VOO. This is a much more diverse and representative of the market as a whole, and from this we can see that it has continually increased, similar to the ARKK fund. That being said, if we look at the graph from the right, from February of 2021 on, the 500 fund has continued to increase, but compared to the more targeted and specified ETF shown on the left, that has decreased. So that shows that even ETFs can be more or less diverse to one another, and why widespread diversification is important. One thing I wanted to bring up was the economic comparison of the COVID-19 outbreak and the impact that it had on the stock market as compared to the Spanish flu outbreak of 1918 and the impact that it had on the market. So during the Spanish flu, there were no recorded days where the stock market average moved more than 2.5%. Yet during the COVID-19 outbreak, there were 24 such instances. And there are a few different reasons that could be attributed to this. First off, there's a very different social, political, and cultural environment. In 2020, we're much more connected thanks to social media. And this, for good and for bad, has allowed information to travel much more quickly, which can be attributed to some of these days where certain news becomes widespread and it creates significant fluctuations in the market. Furthermore, the U.S. economy is very different in 2020 than it was 100 years ago. 100 years ago, 61% of employment was in agriculture and manufacturing industry, as compared to 10% now. So clearly, the economy of the United States and the sectors that people work in are very different. Something I also had the ability to talk to my advisor about was the governmental impact of how the government attempted to respond to this. And what we discussed was that with this past pandemic, the government attempted to have a much more hands-on approach. And we could see this through the stimulus checks that the government gave out, the PPP program for businesses, and extended unemployment benefits. Now this, for some people, would say that this has been a good thing. Now that some of these stimulus and unemployment benefits are continued, as tourism sectors reopen in cities that highly rely on tourism, many businesses are struggling to find workers because their unemployment benefits are seemingly more beneficial than it is to go back to work, and thus they have no reason to go back to work. and in many places, especially across the South, where tourism has quickly increased to levels that it used to be, employment is still low and businesses are struggling as a result. Furthermore, I want to talk about the rise of cryptocurrency. I think in the past year, everybody has become much more aware of cryptocurrencies, and people's view differ on whether or not it's an investment, a wise investment, or whether it's more of a guess or a risk-taking, similar to gambling. And as we can see on the figure on the left of the screen is a graph of the value of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is obviously the most popular cryptocurrency, and the rapid rise and fall of Bitcoin, as seen in the graph on the left, shows just how volatile it is. Furthermore, it's somewhat easy for people to quote unquote create their own cryptocurrencies. The image in the middle is an image of Dogecoin. This is a meme or joke based currency that began back in 2013, as well as the image on the right, known as Potcoin, which was started by Dennis Rodman, a former NBA basketball player, to spark an attempt to decentralize banking when it comes to the legalized cannabis industry. So people have taken their own take, and you can take your own take on how you would view cryptocurrencies and different cryptocurrencies as to whether or not they'd be a wise investment. Furthermore, we've seen different instances like the quick rise and fall of GameStop and AMC, thanks to what is known as a short squeeze. Now, obviously, GameStop and AMC, these are companies that have struggled for the past 5 or so years, thanks to the ability for people to shop online. Going to the movie or going to the store has reduced the necessity for companies like GameStop and AMC. Now, many large investment funds have done something called shorting stocks. They've shorted GameStop and AMC, for example, which essentially means they bet that the company will do poorly in the future, which makes sense considering GameStop and AMC are relatively outdated and useless companies. Now, thanks to social media such as the Wall Street Bets subreddit that I referenced earlier, individual investors essentially betted against the larger firms, were able to get these stock prices to go up. They were able to make money while the larger investment firms were left to take the brunt of the impact. And that's some of my citations didn't load. I'll try to sort that out with Miss McDonald. But thank you for coming to my presentation.
Thank you very much, Peter. At this time, we will open it up. If anyone has any questions, you may unmute. Peter, what was the most striking thing that you found?
For me, I thought that the comparison to the Spanish flu is an interesting thing for me to look into. There were a lot more differences, I guess, than I would have expected. But then when I look at it on a more detailed level, I understand the reasoning behind these big differences.
Peter, if you had to pick a topic again, would you do the same one? Would you, or what would you learn that kind of took you somewhere else and you'd like to change it a little?
I think I found the cryptocurrency part very fascinating, and it's something I don't feel like I know a whole lot about beyond kind of what I covered in this project, and that's something I think I'd be interested in learning more about. I'd also like to thank you. I'd also like to thank Carl Brewer and Mr. Anthony Mancini for helping me out throughout this project process.
Nice job, Peter.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Peter? All right. Well, thank you very much, Peter. You did an awesome job. We're very happy you were able to present today. Thank you to the audience. We will be starting the next presentation in about 4 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for coming tonight for this presentation of a capstone project by Christopher Disotell. Chris, you can begin when you are ready.
Alrighty then. So let me. Just want to make sure before I start this video that we can hear it.
For the first part of the capstone project, as you can see, this is the
Can you guys hear that?
part
We
of
can.
me
Can you make it just a
cutting
little
the
bit
wood
louder?
for the table I was making.
I think that's as loud as I guess it's gonna get on my phone then.
That's fine. Go ahead.
Alrighty.
We can adjust on our end.
All right.
Thank you.
Oops.
Make sure use a tape measure, get everything lined up to the exact marks. Get some quick help from Dad. Make sure you have the professional line it up for you. So again, the same thing. So now as you can see, I'm burning the wood that I just cut as the border for the American flag table. Definitely a slow, tedious process to get it the way you'd want it. Now after burning the wood, we are lining up the perfect border, leaving about 1/4 of an inch so you can put the epoxy down. And as you can see, during this one, we're using a nail gun. All right, yeah, put plenty of nails in there. Yep, just putting all 4 sides on. Get it as lined up as we possibly can for some amateurs. Perfect. Now, after putting the border around, here's yet again another clip of us burning the wood, another slow process. And these are the legs of the table. And now, as you can see, one of the longest parts of the project was etching out each one of the stars. So as this close-up you will see is this sharp tool that you would pretty much trace the whole star out and just pretty much piece by piece take out. Now for the top of the table is the epoxy, where you'd have to mix the two liquids together to form the hardening liquid, if you want to say that. Give it a good stir.
One more and that's, I'm gonna mix it.
Now I was pouring the epoxy onto the table and gradually start to level it out. The epoxy was definitely tricky to work with. Now after letting the epoxy dry for about 24 hours, just to get some of the bubbles out and make sure it sets nicely, as you say, you use the blowtorch. And now for the other half was the shed. Here is me and my dad pretty much measuring the whole shape of the shed. Pretty much marking everything out, all four corners where the middle is. And here's me using the excavator to just about level the area out, get rid of all the junk and leaves. As you can see, the big root that came right out of the ground, so leave a nice hole. That's what it's out. Getting the stone to make a level base for the shed.
Oh fucking shit.
So roughly for that, we got about I think 1.5 yards, 2 yards of just some stone. And here's me putting in the floor joists after squaring the whole shed out to make sure it's a perfect square. And another long process was putting 3 nails on each side, front and back. Now here we are putting on the floor with pretty much just the basic pieces of plywood. And now after doing this, we're starting to put the walls together. So here we are putting all the studs in the wall, all exactly about 16 inches apart. So when you put the sheetrock on, everything lines up about perfect. After putting all that together, you would lay down the texture 111, which is pretty much another form of plywood as a siding to give it that nicer look. And after this, we stand the wall up, not the super heavy wall that And then pretty much in between every stud, you just give about 2 nails. As you can see, my dad goes behind the wall to make sure we can get the wall perfectly lined up for the line we put. So for the time being, while we put the other walls up, we just nail this 2x4 in, just so the wall is safe and doesn't fall over. And we have the man of all trades, Grandpa Bill, who is the master worker, we should say, of building the shed, the brains of it all. And here's yet again just another clip of us putting the texture 111 for the walls. Standing another wall up. Fun process of doing that. As you did with the other wall, just about 2 nails per stud. As we try to hit this wall back into place after putting the nails in, didn't work out as planned, but here we are putting up the back wall, putting all the studs together. More textured 111. And as this back wall, it's a little different because the way you measure the studs, you would have to cut the 2 smaller pieces of textured 111. So as you see us stand the wall up, there are 2 pretty much empty spots, which we later put the textured 111 on, so it can almost create like a 90-degree angle on the outside, so it's nicely closed. last wall is definitely the most difficult wall because with the windows and the doors, you have to cut out a bunch of joint or studs, we'll call them. Because with the windows, you would have to put, to give or take a certain amount of room to put the window in, you'd have to put more holders, as you would say. And a lot of different size cut wood. As right here, we're just putting the studs in. And one tactic we used was getting the two textured pieces of 111 and we'd almost put them down exactly where they'd go, and then we traced the door out. So as you see here, we have the marks for the door and we nailed it in. So as we nail the wood in, once we stand the wall up, we'll cut the door out after. So more nails, 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 nails. And right here, we're just a little short-staffed, as you can say, just me and Grandpa Bill, so this wall is definitely a little bit heavier. Yep, this wall is definitely a real struggle trying to get this out for the most part. Because while I'm trying to tap this wall into place, you can see with the windows, how you have to add the extra pieces of 2x4 and the shorter pieces. And now once this whole wall's stood up and we cut the windows out, you can see now that we put the hinges onto the door, we cut it out after.
Fucking incredible. That door is still locked.
And now the roof. So once you would, once all the walls were stood up, you'd have two about 1.25 inch pieces where you'd set this center beam right across. So then you would cut all the rafters, which have, like, you can tell, like, this angle to them, and they'd sit right on the top of the walls, with a little notch in them. And the hardest part was trying to get these nails through these weird angles to try to make sure everything's lined up and it's still sturdy. So that's why you can see we're having the professionals do this stuff. And nice little clip of it all finally together. More plywood.
Yep.
After lifting all these heavy pieces up a ladder right under the roof, you can see we're finally nailing them together. And now here we are putting almost a prep for shingles down, which is it just mostly keeps the water out. So make sure everything's fully sealed up. And yeah, after many hours and multiple days is a full shed. Finally painted with the roof on it and all the windows together. So I hope everyone enjoyed my year-long capstone project about woodworking. Thank you very much.
So as that video was shown, as I should have said at the beginning, but that capstone project was almost more of a informational piece, if I'd want to say that. So that's what that whole, pretty much the point of the video was.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Chris, for sharing. Is there any questions from the, or are there any questions, I'm sorry, from the audience today? Ms. Lazat?
Chris, can you tell me what kind of wood that was that you were burning and why the veins of the wood, I don't even know if you call it that, why it turned out so dark? It was so beautiful.
So I'm pretty sure it was just a pine. So it's almost, I think it's I'm not exactly sure how or why it burns like that, but it's almost the I don't know exactly how to say it, but oh, how would you call that? Oh, like I'm going blank right now. I know what it is, but I can't.
I'll catch you at school at some point, and I'll find out, because it was really impressive. I've seen people do it before, and I was really impressed with that. So thanks for doing that and sharing it.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Two questions, Chris. What was your biggest takeaway from this, and what's it like working with family?
Working with family is great. It's perfect for the person who I am, because obviously everyone goes down their different paths, and that's kind of how I grew up with stuff like that. But I love it. I mean, so especially having two people like that as my dad and my grandfather, who I watch after almost every day, and to learn from that is, I think, the best way to do it. And that's where I get the most of my information from. And I think one of my biggest takeaways with that stuff is patience. That's the one thing I learned a lot with all this stuff, that all this stuff just doesn't happen overnight, especially with working hands-on with stuff like this.
Thank you. Other questions for Chris?
So I'm his mom, and I'm going to be biased, but Christopher, you and Dad and Grandpa did a great job, but and I'm not trying to do his project for him, but I think, and I could be wrong, Mrs. Al, but I think the wood burning part of that has to do with the minerals and the oxygen that's in the wood. I could be wrong though. You could double check with his father to get the exact answer, but I think to answer your question, that's partially why.
I was really impressed to be able to see like the fine work, working with, those little fine tuning things, and then really the larger project, Chris. It was really neat to see the diversity of your ability with woodworking.
Yeah, thank you. That was almost the whole goal of the thing, is to kind of do something that was like neat and intricate, and almost kind of finish off with that to almost like a final, like, well done piece of something.
Well, it worked in my view.
Perfect. Thank you.
May I ask a question? Chris, what's your next project?
Oh boy. Oh man.
No pressure.
I think it would be almost like a detached garage kind of thing for like another car.
Cool.
So definitely oh, sorry, I must have been on mute for that. But I think it's like a detached garage. So almost like a shed kind of thing, but definitely something much bigger.
Wow. Good for you.
Thank you.
Keep going. You did a great job.
Any other questions for Chris? All right. Thank you very much again, Chris. Excellent job. We appreciated your presentation. Thank you to the audience. We will be starting the next presentation in what looks like about 4 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming to this capstone presentation. Oh, we have one more entering. And all right, thank you again for coming to this presentation tonight. Katie, you can begin when you are ready. Good luck.
Lovely, thank you. So for my year-long capstone project this year, I did a guide to shopping sustainably in Guilford. And I chose this project because not only is it something that I'm passionate about, but I thought that this year I wanted to do a project that other people could be a part of too. So I made this as a guide, both for myself to learn more about how I could be sustainable in Guilford, as well as something for other people to use and possibly share as well. I'm interested in being an environmental scientist. I'll be attending college next year for that. So this is something that's near and dear to my heart as someone who wants to both be more sustainable myself and help other people. So to start off, why it's important to shop sustainably. And one of the most important things about shopping sustainably is shopping local. So sometimes it's very tempting to go off of Amazon or going to Walmart and just buying everything we need. But in Guilford, we're fortunate enough to have a lot of small towns right around our green, which is nice because it's a very compact area. And we actually have a lot of things that we could use instead there. And the good news is that you are already sustainable. So by using the products that you already have and using them for their entire lifespan, instead of just buying things new whenever you'd like, it's a great way to decrease your carbon footprint because not only are you consuming less, but you're also creating less waste. So oftentimes when people think of becoming more eco-friendly, and I'm definitely guilty of this myself as well, we get caught up with the eco-friendly branded products. And then we go out and we go to Amazon or we go to those big stores that aren't exactly environmentally friendly, and we buy all of those eco-friendly products, and then we have to throw away the stuff that we already have. So one way that it would be great to reduce your carbon footprint and help yourself and be more sustainable is by using up the products that you already have before you go and you buy new ones. So a lot of people believe that their individual actions don't have a large effect on global environmental issues. But the truth is, if we all do a little bit each day just to help overall, it does have an impact in the long run. And that's really important because we still face so many issues environmentally that if we could do just something small, not only will it be better for us in the long run, but for all of the people that we live with. And there are many ways to try and live an eco-friendly lifestyle. Some people choose to change their diet. Some people choose to buy different products. There's different ways that we can source our energy to be more sustainable. So you don't have to tackle all of them at once. There are many little things that you can do to help reduce your carbon footprint. And in Guilford, our environmental impact may be larger than one might assume. We tend to live in a wealthier town, and wealthier towns in general just tend to release more carbon emissions. We have larger houses that require more energy. We're more prone to e-waste with our electronics. We have cars and we tend to drive further because we have the ability to do so and traveling, and all of that adds up. So in Guilford, a lot of people have the means to do so, and so I wanted to make something that would help people in the right directions. So some easy ways to reduce your environmental impact without buying anything new. There's a lot of pretty simple ways. I'm sure you've heard a lot of them. In Guilford, we've had the plastic bag ban, which is a pretty big one, and that's a great way to reduce plastic waste. Another great way to reduce your waste is composting. So instead of letting your food waste and your yard waste rot in a landfill, you can compost it in your backyard, which is pretty easy. And that way you're reducing the amount of stuff that ends up in a landfill. And then you have some lovely nutrient-rich soil for your garden. Another way to conserve energy is to unplug things when they're not in use. For example, any chargers, small appliances like a toaster oven or anything like that. Conserving water is another really big one. That one tends to be more obvious. And then of course there's turning off lights and all of the other lovely ones we've heard of. I won't go through this whole list, I'll save some time. So the first way that I started to organize my website in terms of user use would be the shopping by store. So for this part of my project, I went around and I called and emailed. I did some interviews with small business owners around Guilford, and I wrote up little profiles on their store based on sustainability. And this part of my project was really fun. I thoroughly enjoyed going around and meeting all the business owners. I did unfortunately get stood up by quite a few, and sometimes I would show up for the interview and the people weren't ready. But it was really great. I still got quite a few good small business owners. And it was quite fun because I genuinely had no idea that some of these stores had such great sustainable products. For example, Lulu's on the Green. I just thought it was kind of a pajama store. I always see pretty dresses in the windows when I walk by, but they actually have quite a few different brands. When I went into Lulu's, she showed me around to all of the different toiletries and candles. She had a bunch of silk accessories that are eco-friendly because they're organic, so you can compost them or reuse them easier. And this was actually the first business that I worked with. And it was really interesting because before I had created this page of my website, none of the businesses wanted to work with me because I was just a high schooler and they didn't really want to get their business involved in that. But once I had set up this page and edited the whole thing, I was able to show it to other businesses and it was much easier to get people involved. So each of my pages is set up pretty similarly. I'll go through a few of them just to show everyone. So for example, this is Lulu's. I have a little picture of the front of the store. I also wrote a little blurb based on either the interview or the emails that I corresponded with the person. And then I went through and did a little bit about each of the brands. And some of the brands have links to the brand's website, and some of them just have a little bit about what the store owner told me. It was also very interesting because I had my own version of what a sustainable product was versus what some of the store owners said. And there's quite a bit of conflict there, especially with Lulu's. She had a bunch of really lovely bamboo sweaters. And when I looked into the website, I'd found that, well, yes, there was bamboo in there and that would be sustainable material. They also had a lot of plastics in them. So unfortunately, there were some times where I couldn't count things in the brand or under the name that I wanted to. Another great store that I worked with is Evergreen Fine Craft. And while for Lulu's, I went in and spoke to the owner of the store, for Evergreen Fine Craft, I corresponded over email because that's what was easiest for the store owner. And she's just sent me the link to their Facebook and said, all of our products are on there. You can write whatever you want. So this one I had a lot of fun with. It was really interesting learning about how their products were sustainable because I had been into evergreens before, but I had no idea that they were eco-friendly products. But most of the stuff there was crafted in America. Most of them were by small business owners, and then Evergreen sells them for a certain percent of the profit. And so since they're handmade and most of them use organic materials, they're more eco-friendly than a similar product that you might find in a Walmart or something like that. They have really pretty products. As you can see here, they had everything from soaps to books to socks to really fun bags like you can see there. So like I said, for this one, I had a lot of fun going through and I had much more freedom in what I got to publish on this website. And lastly, I will show you Marijane Boutique. And Miss Lisa is a lovely woman. She was the most recent person that I was able to work with. And this interview was really fun because and she sells very high-end consignment stuff. So it's interesting too to see how consignment can both be cheaper, like I saw in Cinderella's Attic and in Hole in the Wall, as well as thousands of dollars purses, and you can get anything sustainable if you look hard enough. So she was really lovely to work with, and I had fun with that interview too. The second way that I ordered my website was shopping by product. So as you saw before, I organized it by the store so you could look specifically what was in each store. But for ease of use, I also organized it by product in case there's something specific that anyone was looking for on the website. And as you can see here, I did make a last resort shopping online tab for anything that couldn't be found locally in Guilford. So this is all the stuff that just could be found in Guilford. I also decided to add the price points because I know that's quite a big factor. And it was also just another way that I was able to organize the information for the people using this website. Grocers in Guilford that I'd never heard of that are sustainable. So that was pretty interesting. Lastly, I have my last resort shopping online page, and helping small businesses is great for our own community. It helps people in our community who own businesses. It helps our local economy, and it does lessen the carbon footprint because there's no need for transportation back and forth for the product, especially if we have returns, and that just adds a lot more. Packaging that we get is also creates extra waste that we don't need. So in theory, it would be perfect if everyone could just shop local, but obviously there are some things nowadays that we can only find online. My favorite of the 3 categories here that I made was the eco-friendly Amazon alternatives page. And here I basically just found these websites, and they're really great. They're all eco-friendly. They sell eco-friendly products. Both of the ones that I listed here also focus on trying to make sure that there's a net zero carbon emission for the transportation required for shipping, as well as eco-friendly or compostable packaging. So that was really nice to see as well. And both of these websites, I compared them to Amazon because pretty much anything I could think of that one might need, I could find on these websites. They had clothes, they had kitchen stuff, they had cleaning supplies, pretty much anything. So I would like to try and use these in the future instead of Amazon if there's anything I can't find in Guilford, because they're really cool. And so there was Life Without Plastic, which was the first one. It was a little bit cheaper, and it's pretty much the eco-friendly swap of most materials we have in our everyday life. And then the second one I found was Earth Hero, and this one was slightly more expensive, but I didn't think it was too bad. And these ones were much more aesthetically pleasing than Life Without Plastic. And the website claims to focus on more long-lasting products, which is really good because, as I mentioned before on why we should shop sustainably, it's really important to use up what we have before we buy new. So by finding long-lasting products, we don't have to buy new as frequently. I also had 2 other categories. It was kind of difficult to find truly eco-friendly on my websites. There was usually just 1 or 2 things that didn't fit my criteria, whether it was the packaging, the sourcing of the products, or just the transportation methods. So there weren't as many of these, unfortunately. But another one that I found was beauty and toiletries. So once again, these were sort of everyday things. Here we see cutlery, they had cleaning supplies, and EcoRoots was very cheap. It was a great website, and all the products were vegan and plastic free. They're also very pretty products as well. A lot of the time, sustainable products tend to be just metal and kind of boring, but this website had a really good variety of every type of product, so you could really find what you needed. And then secondly, this one was kind of random, but I thought it was really cool. I think it's called Esty. I don't know how to pronounce it. And everything is made biodegradable with natural materials. Even the packaging and the transportation is trying to be as sustainable as possible. There's a variety of skincare product as well as a smile care line. They have some really cool toothpaste, chapsticks, and this really interesting biodegradable floss, which I had never heard of. Another cool thing that I liked about this website is that they had a Then we also had kitchen and cleaning supplies. So this one was very moderately priced. It was similar to an eco-friendly Amazon. It pretty much had anything in your kitchen, cleaning, trash, Tupperware, and laundry supplies that you could think of. They have a specific section for zero waste versus just eco-friendly. The difference for that is that eco-friendly products are just tend to be sourced with environmental impacts in mind, whether zero waste means that you can completely reuse, repurpose, or compost them. So it was really interesting on this website because it was the first time that I had seen that clear differentiation between the two. So I really liked the organization of that website. And then we'll just go back to why we shop sustainably. So for this website, I really just wanted to focus on being user-friendly and something that everyone in Guilford can use. As I mentioned before, sustainability is something that's really important to me. And I think that we all kind of know in the back of our heads that we can find things that we need in Guilford, but knowing where to find them is a bit more difficult. And when I was going through this project, it definitely was more difficult than I had anticipated. There were quite a few stores that I reached out to, and unfortunately, they just didn't meet what that much difference. And it's also important that food tends to be healthier when it's local as well. I know a lot of people know about eggs, how if they're free range and if they're just kind of let to go what they want, there's actually more nutritional value in the egg itself. So that's something that's important if you're looking for organic or just in general healthier food. It's really cool to shop local. And on that note, I just wanted to share one more website that I found. It was called Healthy Plan Eat. It's a fun little pun there. And so on this website, it was actually made by another local Connecticut citizen. And when she was designing this website, she went around to all of our local farms in Connecticut and she discovered what they sell when, and she made a little guide so you could enter in what you were looking for and where you lived. They have pickup options as well as they can deliver it to you. And it's a great way to connect you to local sustainable farms so that you can have a healthier and more sustainable diet. All right. I would just like to give a quick shout out to all of the stores that I worked with, even the ones that didn't respond to me. I hope that maybe next year or in the future, someone else in the Capstone program can pick up this project, or maybe when I come home from college, I can continue to add more websites. Because I know in Guilford, as well as in neighboring towns such as Brantford and Madison, there's so many great ways that we can be sustainable and support our local business owners who work so hard, even if they're not completely sustainable. It's better than nothing and than buying online. I think it would be really fun to continue this project because it's ever evolving. Stores don't always keep the same products in season. I know I worked with Lulu's First, as I mentioned before, and even recently I got an email from the owner saying we have more sustainable products. So I think that a project like this would be really cool to continue, whether that be by me or someone else. And I think that it's really important to shop sustainably. Thank you for coming to my presentation. That's all.
Nice job. Thank you very much, Katie.
Thank you.
Are there any questions from the audience?
I have a comment, Katie. This was awesome. And as somebody who agrees and tries to shop sustainably and subscribe to eco-friendly practices, I learned quite a few things. So thank you. I'm really excited to check out some of these products locally, but also I'm really excited to check out the Healthy Plan Eat. That's great information. So do you plan on trying to update? I know you're going to be really busy at college, but you said you are hoping maybe somebody will pick up the ball and run with it in terms of your website, or?
Yes, I think that, as I said before, it's something that's always changing. So it would be really interesting to either continue this when I'm home in the summer or have someone else do it. I worked with my mentor, Terry Keanne. Hi, I see she's here. She's really helpful in helping me find different businesses that I'd never heard of. So I'm sure if someone else were to get involved, they could find even more, and the more information, the better.
Yeah, it's great. Great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, Katie. That was super cool. And it was put together so nicely. It was like really nice to look at. I was wondering, I was just trying to find it online, but what exactly is it called? And like, is there a link so we can look at it?
Yes, I can post the link on the chat. It's also published on the Sustainable Guilford Task Force website, but I can put it in the chat right. There you go.
Hi, Katie. Congratulations. Great job on this. And the Sustainable Guilford Task Force is really interested in making a link from our website to yours so that we can raise the profile of this. I think it's really, really important work that you've done. And I do agree with you. I hope someone picks this up and keeps it going.
Me too. Thank you so much for all of your help this year too.
Oh, absolutely. It's a pleasure.
Any other questions for Katie? Katie, I don't live in Guilford, so what would you recommend for me in my area to be the best way to start?
There are some websites online that I was able to find if you look up sustainable places near me. I focused on just Guilford, but when I looked that up, I found quite a few in Brantford and Madison. And then from there, you can either look up on their websites if you want something that's specifically in your town. I just noticed as I was walking through, just like on everyday adventures or when I was strolling through the green, I would look in the windows of shops and just be like, oh, wow, I think that's something that could be sustainable. So you don't have to do a whole research project on it like I did, but if you just kind of take note in your everyday life of little things that could be sustainable, that's kind of how I started to find what businesses I wanted to work with.
Thank you. Are you connected at all with the Environmental Action Club here at the high school?
I was for my first 3 years of high school, but unfortunately this year I had dance when the meetings occurred, so I couldn't do it. But I actually helped work on the plastic bag ban in Guilford. It's a great club. They always get a lot done, so it's really nice.
If we can't find someone potentially in Capstone to pick up where you have left off, that might be an interesting avenue to attempt.
Oh yeah, that would be interesting.
We'll get you some sustainability. Other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much, Katie, for sharing. This was an incredible presentation. We really appreciate it. Thank you to all the guests tonight. And at this time, we are looking probably about 6 minutes out till the next presentation. We are up with Zori. Zori, I think. Then thank you very much to everyone for coming tonight to Zori's presentation for her capstone project. Zori, the screen is yours and you can begin when you're ready. Good luck.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming to my presentation. I decided to research about stem cell therapy and how it works and what it does. I decided to pick a quote to start off with: stem cell research can revolutionize medicine more than anything since antibiotics, said by Ron Reagan. Stem cells are specialized cells that have the ability to differentiate into types of cells about other parts of our body. There are a few main types of stem cells which are embryonic stem cells, which are found in the baby's embryo once fertilization happens. Adult stem cells, which all humans have, and when they are already differentiated, and then there's induced pluripotent stem cells as well, which is another type of cell. The discovery of stem cells goes back to the early 20th century by a guy named Paul Ehrlich, I think. He was looking into a cork that covers a alcoholic bottle, and there was different holes and such, and how things were constructed, and took a long time, but through his research, the research of stem cell of of a stem cell that can differentiate instead. There's also the discovery of stem cells that was of induced pluripotent stem cells, which was discovered by a Japanese guy named Shinya Yamanaka, who took a skin cell and used proteins to differentiate. My place. And took a skin cell and used proteins to make it a induced pluripotent stem cell, and then used proteins to put it back at the skin cell. The process of differentiation is how stem cells become specialized, and the outermost germ layer is called ectoderm, and then which is specialized into skins and neurons. Mesoderm is skeletal blood cells and red blood cells, and endoderm is mostly organs. Induced pluripotent stem cells are cells that have been differentiated, like a skin cell. Then, cells that have been specialized, but through proteins and through the lab have become undifferentiated, so that scientists can study how to differentiate it, so we can study regeneration medicine and other things like that. There are a lot of countries that allow stem cell research currently, which in Asia is China, Japan, and Singapore. Europe is Spain, Italy, Germany, UK, Croatia, Lithuania, Slovakia, Belgium, Sweden, Austria, Ireland, Luxembourg, and Poland. Some of the European countries have stricter rules than others, and for countries in North America, it's the United States and Canada. There are some controversies surrounding stem cell therapy, which is how safe is the science, and as a cloned sheep that happened a while ago, cruelty or good for research, and using embryos for stem cell therapy in research, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because IVF clinics would throw bad embryos out, so we might want to use it for research, but other people argue that embryos is killing a living being and we shouldn't be using it for research. I also decided to study two diseases. I decided to study Alzheimer's disease and chronic kidney disease. So yeah. Scientists don't fully understand what causes Alzheimer's disease. There's a lot of factors that we think that might cause it. There's also two proteins that could be responsible for it that cause the neurons to not be able to communicate properly with each other. So yeah. The left side of the brain, you can see what a person with severe Alzheimer's has, what the brain would look like, and the right would be a healthy normal brain. Alzheimer's disease is a widespread disease that causes many neurons to stop functioning and lose connections with other neurons eventually and die. Alzheimer's disease affects parts of the brain, including the entorhinal cortex, cerebral cortex responsible for language, reading, and social behavior. Eventually, many other parts of the brain are affected. Over time, living with Alzheimer's disease is fatal. So stem cell therapy and how it can help Alzheimer's disease would ultimately be to create new, it would be, not ultimately, but a lot of the ways that people have been studying it so far is so we could create new neurons successfully in the lab using induced pluripotent stem cells and figuring out how to do that properly, and also MSC cells, which are found in the bone marrow as well too. clinicaltrials.gov site Alzheimer's. This website database has all countries studying it. Of those 29, 11 are currently recruited. Relationship of chronic kidney disease and stem cell therapy. Before figuring out how stem cell therapy can be applied to chronic kidney disease, one must first know the causes of chronic kidney disease. 37 million American adults have chronic kidney disease, and millions of others are at increased risk of getting chronic kidney disease. Some major causes of chronic kidney disease is due to high blood pressure and diabetes, but there are some more minor causes too. Chronic kidney disease is a condition characterized by gradual loss of kidney function over a period of time. African Americans, Hispanics, Pacific Islanders, American Indians, and seniors are at increased risk as artery and 2 tests can detect chronic kidney disease, which is blood pressure and urine albumin, I don't know how to read that, and serum creatinine. Healthy kidneys filter out about half a cup of blood every minute. The kidneys are responsible for controlling one's blood pressure, making red blood cells, keeping bones strong and healthy, balancing hormone levels, and smaller blood vessels. What happens is the blood goes into the kidneys, and then smaller blood vessels there until the blood reaches the nephron, which is the part of the kidney that's responsible for filtering out things. And then nephron, your blood is filtered by tiny blood vessels of the glomeruli, then flows out of your kidney through the vein. Others doing research, there's obviously other institutions and universities that are studying it. Harvard was the easiest to find, and they had the most detailed plans of what they're trying to research. So the Harvard Stem Cell Institute has developed a short, medium, and long-term plan strategies to develop new therapies for diabetes-related chronic kidney disease. They have identified proteins in the MSC cells, I don't know how to pronounce the actual forward for the first one, that could be put into dialysis that expose patients' blood to these cells to allow the body to repair proteins to be delivered to the kidney. Nephron should be heard because the nephron and the kidney has a very complicated structure that the scientists are still not sure how it works. Currently, for clinical trials going on for kidney disease in general, there's 3,313 enrolled going on right now. Of those 3,313 studies in the database, 416 of them are currently recruiting. The risks and the unknowns are that stem cell therapy is a relatively new research field, which people aren't exactly sure of what it is. There's always risks when you try something new. And the unknowns are still unknown. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how long this is going to last. The way I got introduced to stem cell therapy was through a podcast I listened to with my mom. There was an interesting episode. The entire podcast is about biohacking your body. There was an interesting episode of how this guy named Harry Adelson helps people with spinal back injuries and other kind of injuries related to pain. And he takes stem cells from your bone marrow, and then he redistributes them, and it has helped a lot of people. The clinic he works in is called Dossier Clinics, and he's traveled around, and I was interested in that, so I decided, hey, it would make a cool capstone project, why not? Conclusion. Most people reflect on their research and what they have learned throughout the research paper, or they say what the overall goal is, again, if it was a proposal, but I'm not going to do either. Since I started with a quote in the beginning, I'm going to reflect on the quote at the end. Stem cell research can revolutionize medicine more than anything since antibiotics by Ronald Reagan. I agree with his statement after doing some thinking about this, that it will revolutionize medicine. I do think, however, in order for it to revolutionize medicine, people need to be more clear of how it works. There needs to be more standard guidelines of research and how we can research this safely that people are okay with. and it just needs to be talked about more. We don't really know that much about this, and it should be talked about more. So special thanks to Eric, who's actually in the call right now, and also Esteban Mazzoni, who's an NYU professor, for helping me with the project. It was really fun to talk to him. He couldn't unfortunately make it today, but it was overall fun to talk to him. There's other things I found that did not make it onto this presentation, unfortunately. Some of which was cool. The Coursera course, which I actually found a while ago by like the National Science Museum. Esteban Mazzoni was actually talking on that. Apparently, like a year or two ago, there was a baby born with 3 parents, which isn't typical in the United States. The parents were all from Mexico. What happened is that when the sperm and the egg got together, there was something wrong with the genetics of the egg. So they took the DNA out of the egg, and they took another person's like egg, took the DNA out of that, and then put the DNA of the person who was originally there, and then put into there, and then let fertilization happen naturally, and then put it back into the original mother. And so the person was actually born with 3 parents. It was quite successful. There are some mixed feelings about that, because some people say that it's cool, others say it's weird, and others say it doesn't make sense, but it works, I guess. I don't know exactly how legal things are going to work out for that child, but yeah. There was also another thing that was interesting that also didn't make it into these slides at all. And it was, what was it? I forgot what it was. Oh wait, it was a cool video that Esteban Mazzoni on Coursera. That was his first lecture. He showed a video of tadpoles and how they grow and how the cells work and how a tiny little cell multiplies to become a tadpole. And it was really interesting to watch because I've never watched anything like this. And it was just really interesting. It was also fun to watch there's pictures on the internet of a ordinary cell being injected proteins so it could turn into a induced pluripotent stem cell, which I also thought was cool because I just can't imagine doing that or what it's like. So yeah. I'm done, I guess.
Thank you so much, Laura, for sharing. That was an excellent presentation. Are there any questions from the audience? You may feel free to unmute yourself and ask away.
Zori, you clearly did a lot of research about a lot of things, and I happen to know because I was lucky enough to work with you a little bit about it, and because it was such a vast field. What is it that really surprised you that you learned?
I guess what surprised me is how cells differentiate and how cells become important for development for all creatures, no matter what it is. The scientist who originally discovered stem cells back in the early 20th century, he discovered it originally through a plant and through looking at a corkscrew in a microscope. So I just think it's interesting. And it took a long time for that to be accepted. And I think it took like 100 years for it to be recognized as stem cells in the science community, because when he originally discovered this, people were very skeptical of it.
Zori, your passion and your curiosity certainly come out in the presentation. Where are you going to take this? What are your next plans?
I don't actually really know. I would like to pursue the medical field, but so I'm taking an EMT course over the summer to learn a bit more about just general medical stuff. I don't really know, honestly. I think researching is fun, but I don't think I'm the kind of person who would be able to do this in the lab or do it. I don't think I would trust myself. I admire those who can do this kind of work and who work in the medical field, like Eric, who is my friend in California and is a family doctor in California as well.
Thank you. Other questions for Zori? All right. Well, thank you very much, Zori. Thank you everyone else for coming tonight. We appreciate all of your participation, and Zori, we certainly appreciate your project. I thank you, everyone. I think that is it for us for tonight. And we will have more presentations tomorrow. So please join us at that time. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.